On my daughter's wedding day, an anonymous text arrived, "Don't go to the wedding. Run." I didn't run. I stood at the jewelry counter holding a pair of diamond earrings I'd spent months selecting, and I felt the world tip sideways. I called the number and it rang and rang. No answer, until finally someone I hadn't heard from in years spoke my name and spoke a warning that changed everything. That message made me do something I'd never done before. I couldn't ignore what I learned next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The diamonds glimmered under the jeweler's loupe like tiny cold suns. I watched the facets catch the light and thought of the look on my daughter Emily's face when she opened the box. For months I'd gone back and forth between styles, budgeting, and second-guessing. $15,000 was a lot to spend on a pair of earrings, but after Evelyn died 10 years ago, moments like this mattered even more. This was my last chance to do something right for my daughter on a day that was supposed to be perfect. The salesperson at the boutique, polite, patient, used to handling nervous buyers, set the velvet box into my hands with the practiced care of someone who wrapped objects that never asked questions. "These will be perfect for the bride," she said. I signed the charge, my handwriting a little shakier than usual. The Tiffany bag felt heavier when I left the counter than the box had felt beneath my palm. I kept expecting to feel light, to feel the relief that buying a meaningful gift used to bring. Instead, unease crowded in like a shadow. My phone buzzed once in my jacket. I glanced down, expecting a confirmation from the florist or one of the vendors. Instead the screen lit with 3 short words that made my stomach drop. "Don't go to the wedding. Run." The mall around me kept moving. Families, tourists, a couple walking hand in hand, everyone going about their day. I read the message again and then again. I tried to think of who could know I was buying the earrings. Not many people. Emily had kept the details of where she wanted to be married quiet until the last minute. The vendors knew. My assistant Margaret knew. Who else? I dialed the number. It rang and rang, answering machine, no name. I tried again. Nothing. The salesperson watched me, concern crossing her face. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked. I nodded and forced a smile I didn't feel. "Just wedding nerves," I lied. The lie came easily. I've built things my whole life by staying calm in crises. There's always a plan to make things right. But this time the plan felt like someone else's map scrawled over the one I trusted. I left the mall with the Tiffany bag under my arm and walked to a small cafe near the food court. I needed coffee and a place to think. The bag sat on the table like evidence. I checked the phone about a dozen times in 30 minutes. Another message arrived from the same number. "I'll explain everything later, but don't go home today. Trust me." That message was all warning and no detail. My first instinct was to dismiss it. Spam, a prank. My second instinct was to call Emily and wake her. If someone was threatening, she had a right to know. Then a third quieter voice in me, the one that's kept me alive through bad deals and blown deadlines, said to slow down and verify. Whoever sent the messages wanted me to react. They wanted to control my movements. That itself felt dangerous. I booked a room at the Renaissance Cleveland Hotel for the night, the kind of small precaution that felt absurd and necessary at the same time. Room 815. High floor. City view. I told myself I would stay for a few hours, take a shower, sleep, and leave in the morning for the wedding as if nothing had happened. But I didn't sleep. My mind circled the message and the number like a dog circling a bone. It wasn't until nearly midnight that the phone finally rang. A voice I hadn't heard in years said my name, slow, careful, with an edge I remembered from older, tougher days. Marcus Hale. My former partner at Hayes Contracting, the one I'd split from after a messy settlement 8 years ago, the man who knew far too much about my business and far too little about my social life. He'd called anonymously, or so he said. He didn't explain why he'd texted me. He didn't tell me who had sent the messages. He told me to meet him the next morning at the footbridge by the Playhouse, overlooking the Cuyahoga, at 10. Come alone. Bring whatever you'd take if you had to be away for a while. That sent a cold clarity through me. Marcus wasn't a dramatist. He was blunt, practical. If he was worried, I should be. Marcus and I had parted angry. He'd had a gambling problem and he'd drained cash from the company before I realized. We'd sued, we'd split, and we'd moved on. Still, he's the kind of man who keeps tabs. If he'd seen something, I needed to know what. I asked questions that night. Who overheard what? What did they say? Marcus answered in pieces. He'd been in the attorney's office for a meeting and overheard my daughter and her fiancé, Daniel Ross, talking about protective measures, about a legal setup if I showed signs of decline. Marcus had called me because he'd recognized the names on a paper on the lawyer's desk. He'd heard talk of a specialist doctor, an evaluation, asset transfer timing. He'd heard enough words to stitch together a plan, a guardianship route, a competency finding, a transfer of assets timed around a wedding and honeymoon. I lay awake until the small hours, drinking a scotch and writing notes into the margins of the receipt from the boutique. My business instincts, always tuned to the possibility of fraud, kicked in. If Marcus was right, this wasn't a simple family squabble. This was a plan to remove me from control of Hayes Contracting, to liquidate assets, to install people who would sign paperwork and take the company on terms that favored my daughter's fiancé, who Marcus called ambitious and dangerous when desperate. The word dangerous landed differently than panic. Panic scatters. Dangerous focuses the mind. At dawn I called Marcus back and he confirmed the meeting. He said he'd be on the footbridge at 10, wearing a gray cap. He asked me to bring anything important, passwords, keys, documents, if I could. I changed into a suit anyway, more to keep up appearances than for any idea that I would go on the defensive. But I packed a second bag in the hotel closet, a work duffel with deeds, key contracts, bank statements, and an external drive with copies of critical documents. I left the Tiffany bag tucked under the bed. It felt wrong to parade it, but wrong to show I was rattled. The world expected certain rituals for a wedding. I'd keep most of them and change the rest. The bridge over the Cuyahoga was still wet from overnight drizzle. Marcus stood where he said he would, turning a paper cup of coffee in his hands while he watched the river. He was older, rougher, and when he saw me his expression folded into the familiar mix of regret and stubbornness I remembered from our earlier years together. "You came," he said without greeting. "You called," I replied. He didn't waste words. "You need to know what I heard. I'm not here to pry. I'm here because I hate to see a man get robbed slow and legal." Over the next hour he told me things I wish I'd never heard. He'd been in the law office, Charles Bennett's firm, picking up a document for someone else, and in the waiting room he'd overheard Emily and Daniel discussing timelines. "We move quickly after the honeymoon," Daniel said in Marcus's account. "There's a doctor who will confirm that your dad's memory is poor, Dr. Marcus Rowe. He's recommended by Stevens. With that evaluation in the record, the judge will approve guardianship. We file the transfer the following week." Marcus had written down names and details. He'd seen a printout of legal procedures, and one paragraph with my company's LLC details and asset lists. Marcus was blunt. They planned to sell Hayes and Sons to a buyer who'll pay a fraction. "You'll get a pittance." They'll shrug, say it's for your comfort. Hearing it like that, plain and procedural, made the threat feel organized and inevitable. But it also revealed hubris. They assumed I'd quietly step aside. They assumed I'd be incapable of fighting. They'd set dates, lined up a doctor, discussed buyers, and even talked about places I'd go during the transition. Assisted living communities in Arizona mentioned casually as if that were part of the plan. When Marcus left, I sat on a bench by the river with the city waking around me and thought of the wedding vows that would be spoken tomorrow. I imagined Emily radiant in her dress. Then I pictured legal papers, the signature of a doctor, the courtroom language that would call me incompetent. I pictured signatures on papers transferring what I'd spent 40 years building. The thought of losing what I'd built on someone else's timeline tightened my chest until I could barely breathe. The choice then was obvious. I could storm into the wedding and accuse people in front of guests. I could call the police and make a public spectacle. I could do nothing and hope for mercy. Or I could prepare, deliberately, legally, and precisely in the way I knew how. I had built structures to last. I'd learned to reinforce weak foundations. This was no different. Only now the foundation was family and trust. Today I would gather evidence. Today I would document. Today I would let them think I was vulnerable while I set a trap of my own. I called Charles Bennett's office, my lawyer, a man I'd known professionally for years, to schedule a consultation under the pretense of updating my will. I reached out quietly to an investigator I trusted, to discreetly pull background information on Daniel Ross and Dr. Rowe. I told Margaret to confirm a few last-minute guest additions, nothing more than casual invites. Each move was measured, deliberate. I would not act like a man panicked. I would act like a man preparing. Back in the hotel room that night, I opened a fresh document on my laptop and wrote down a plan. Document conversations, schedule audio, invite family, prepare witnesses, ensure the reception had professional audio. The nuts and bolts of a trap felt oddly similar to the logistics of framing a building. You prepare, you reinforce, you ensure witnesses can see what you see. You make it impossible to deny. This was going to be ugly, but it would be necessary. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I thought of the Tiffany box on my bed and the way Emily had smiled the first time she tried on a pair that nearly matched these earrings. What I was about to do would change everything. It might break her forever. It might end the family. It might also save me from being erased at the stroke of a pen. I went to sleep with the sound of the city in my ears and a plan as solid as concrete forming in my head. The Renaissance Cleveland room was too quiet. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed careful not to intrude on what I was thinking. I moved between the desk and the window in slow, repeated loops, pacing the carpet until the pattern might as well have been burned into it. My notes from the conversation with Marcus lay spread across the desk like evidence in a detective's case. Names, dates, words I wished didn't belong near my daughter. Sometime past noon, I dialed an Uber to take me to Bennett and Hale Law Group, Charles Bennett's office. He'd handled paperwork for Hayes and Sons for years, drafting contracts, reviewing acquisitions, negotiating licensing issues. He was the kind of lawyer who could make or ruin you depending on the thoroughness of his paperwork. I trusted him because he was predictable, careful, methodical. He was also the man whose office walls had hosted my daughter's planning session. The building was 12 floors of glass and stone, overlooking the Cuyahoga River. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of leather and old books, a combination that always made me think of stability and long-standing trust. I gave the receptionist my name and told her I needed to speak with Charles about updating my will and reviewing estate-related questions. She smiled politely, tapped my details into her system, and said she would check his schedule. "Mr. Whitman," she said a moment later, "he can see you in 15 minutes." Charles Bennett greeted me at the door wearing a navy suit, his salt and pepper hair combed back with the precision of a man who never rushed through anything. "Eli, good to see you," he said with a warm handshake. "I wasn't expecting you. How's the wedding planning going? Big weekend for you." "It is," I said, forcing a smile. "And I wanted to get a few things in order before that. Estate documents, mostly." He nodded and motioned toward the leather chair opposite his desk. Always smart to stay ahead of these things. I sat, pretending calm. He didn't know that I was studying every shelf, every folder, every expression, searching for signs of his involvement or complicity. I didn't want to believe it, but the thought of him helping Emily do this felt like betrayal on a level I hadn't prepared for. I cleared my throat. "Before we go over my will, I wanted to ask a general question. Who else has come to you recently with questions related to guardianship or power of attorney?" Charles lifted his eyebrows slightly. "Well, I can't disclose identities or details. Attorney-client confidentiality, of course." "I'm asking generally," I pressed gently. "No names. Just whether it's something you've dealt with recently." He paused. "Truthfully, yes. There was a client asking questions about guardianship procedures. Very high level. Mostly theoretical." My stomach knotted. Was it a young couple? Late 20s? Around the age Emily and Daniel are. Charles hesitated. That hesitation was answer enough. "Eli," he said carefully, "I can't confirm that." "But you didn't deny it," I replied, my voice settling into a calm I didn't feel. "And I have reason to believe they asked specifically about me." He leaned back slightly, the swivel of his chair almost imperceptible. "Eli, if this is about family tension." I cut him off. "Charles, I'm trying to understand whether something illegal is happening under your roof." His face changed, the professional calm slowly shifting into something more alert. "Illegal? Eli, what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting someone used you," I said. "Used your office. Used your paperwork. Used your reputation to prepare a path to declare me incompetent and gain control of Hayes and Sons. Silence filled the room. Charles finally exhaled. Eli, did someone tell you this? I overheard things, I lied smoothly. Enough to know the direction things are heading. His eyes narrowed. If someone is attempting to manipulate the legal system for financial gain, I want no part of it. Then help me, I said. I watched him make his decision. Lawyers don't rush choices when the stakes are high. He weighed loyalty to long-term clients, Emily, by extension, and professional risk. He weighed confidentiality against the law. Then he opened a drawer. He withdrew a thin packet of photocopies and set them on the desk between us. I shouldn't show you these, he said quietly. But you deserve to know. The top page was titled, Adult Guardianship, Procedures and Preliminary Requirements, Ohio Law. The second, Capacity Evaluations, Acceptable Medical Assessments and Recommended Specialists. And on the third page, my name, Elias Whitman, under a heading labeled Case Model. Not filed. Not official. But prepared. Referenced. Ready. My pulse thudded in my ears. Who requested these? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Charles sighed heavily. Eli, I'm sorry. Those 3 words confirmed everything. I took the papers, slid $500 across the desk for the copy fee, and told him I appreciated his honesty. He walked me to the elevator himself, a gesture he reserved for important clients or unsettling conversations. When the elevator doors closed, my breath shuddered out. I clutched the envelope so tightly my knuckles whitened. I hadn't imagined it. My daughter and her fiancé were preparing legal groundwork to remove me. They'd already asked about acceptable doctors, about transfer protocols, about buyers. Everything Marcus had said was true. Back in the lobby, I stepped outside and breathed in cold air that tasted faintly like rain and steel. A mother walked by holding a toddler's hand. An older man sitting on a bench fed pigeons crumbs from his sandwich. Life continued normally for everyone else. For me, the ground had cracked open. I walked until I reached 9th Street. I needed time to think. I needed to decide whether to confront Emily right away or wait. But then a memory rose, Emily asking questions about my insurance last Christmas. Her mentioning how tired I looked during our last dinner. Daniel bringing up the business valuation out of curiosity. The entire past year reframed itself. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret at my office. Daniel stopped by this morning. He asked for our most recent valuation summary. I told him he needed your approval. Just wanted to let you know. The message hit like an electric shock. He was accelerating. They were tightening their timeline. I texted back. Do not give anyone company documents unless I personally request it. No exceptions. Then another thought hit. I hadn't been home since yesterday. Daniel might have gone inside. He might have checked my study. He might have seen my laptop. He might have looked for passwords. I had no idea how deep they'd gone. I couldn't risk returning home without observing first. I walked to the nearest bus stop bench and sat, pretending to wait. My car was still at the hotel. This vantage point wasn't suspicious. I opened my phone and connected to my home security system. Cameras in the driveway, the living room, and my study. 2 notifications jumped out. 1:14 a.m. Motion detected in the living room. 1:21 a.m. Front door opened. I clicked the video. The dark grainy footage showed 2 silhouettes entering my home. One tall, one slimmer. Daniel and Emily. I watched as Daniel opened my study door, glanced around, looked at drawers, scanned the desk surface, then entered the combination code on my document safe, incorrectly. Emily watched from the doorway. They were searching for something. Documents, passwords, evidence, anything that would get them further ahead in the plan. I felt something break inside my chest. Not anger. Not shock. Something more final. Something like mourning, except the person I mourned was the daughter I thought I had. When the footage ended, I sat frozen on the bench as people hurried by on their errands, unaware that my family had splintered into something cold and calculating while I had slept in a hotel. My phone buzzed again. A new text, from the same unknown number from the mall. You need more proof. Don't confront them yet. Trust me. I stared at the screen. Marcus shouldn't have had this number. I hadn't given it to him. Unless this wasn't Marcus. Unless someone else was watching. I dialed the number again. Rings. Rings. No answer. I hung up. A city bus hissed to a stop beside the bench, its brakes screeching. People shuffled inside. Cleveland kept moving on, but I was somewhere else entirely, standing between two lives, one where I pretended nothing was happening and one where I took control before they took everything. I stood and began walking back toward my hotel, the decision already forming in precise, sharp lines. They wanted guardianship. They wanted to claim I was incompetent. No. I would let them believe they were winning. I would let them think I was slow, forgetful, tired. I would let them talk freely in front of me. And then I would destroy their entire plan in one public moment. A wedding reception wasn't just a celebration. It was an audience. A perfect stage. A perfect trap. But first, I needed preparation, evidence, documentation, witnesses, and a plan airtight enough that no judge in Ohio could doubt my competency after what I would reveal. As I walked, I sent Margaret one more message. Cancel all meetings. I won't be in for the rest of the week. And Margaret, keep this message between us. She replied instantly. Of course. Everything all right? I typed a response slowly, deliberately. It will be. Soon. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I meant it. The walk back to the Renaissance felt longer than it should have. Every streetlight, every passing face, every sound from moving traffic carried a weight I couldn't shake. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was clarity. A kind of cold understanding that once the line between trust and harm is crossed, there's no walking it back. If Emily and Daniel were capable of planning my removal, then they were capable of executing it cleanly, legally, and ruthlessly. They had a timeline. They had lawyers. They had a doctor prepared to evaluate me. They had the arrogance of people who believe they are smarter than their target. What they didn't have was the advantage of time anymore. I was awake now. I saw what they were doing. And I was better at this game than they were. By the time I reached my room, the sun was beginning to fall behind the Cleveland skyline. The orange glow pressed through the window and painted the room in a warm, falsely comforting light. I dropped the envelope of documents from Charles Bennett on the desk and turned on every lamp in the room. Darkness wasn't going to help me think. My laptop glowed to life. I opened a new document, this time titled simply, Counterplan. I listed everything I knew. 1. Guardianship research completed by Emily and Daniel. 2. Dr. Marcus Rowe selected as evaluator. 3. Buyer identified, unnamed, but likely someone Daniel contacted. 4. Access attempts made at my home. 5. My company's valuation requested by Daniel without my approval. 6. Wedding tomorrow. Opportunity for confrontation with an audience. 7. Potential witnesses. Family, extended relatives, business colleagues. Then I listed what I needed. 1. Proof of conspiracy. 2. Proof of intent. 3. Proof of attempted fraud. 4. Proof of coercion. 5. Evidence of accessing my home without permission. 6. Evidence of discussing liquidation. 7. Legal protection ahead of any filing. Next, I planned the sequence of events. A. Keep acting confused. This was essential. If they suspected I was aware of their plan, they'd accelerate. They might change tactics entirely. But if I leaned into their assumptions, acted forgetful, hesitant, overwhelmed, they would talk more freely. They would underestimate me. B. Gather evidence secretly. The recordings in my home were accidental. They didn't know I had seen them. That was an advantage. I could use my phone to record conversations. I could openly ask questions that would let them incriminate themselves. C. Build allies. Family members who trusted me would listen. Extended relatives who remembered how I handled past crises would believe me if I presented facts. People love drama, but they love justice more. D. The wedding. This wasn't just an event anymore. It was a courtroom with champagne. A stage with microphones. 200 witnesses. Professional audio equipment that would carry every word. The room became quiet as I refined every detail. Hours passed. The city outside moved into nighttime, headlights reflecting on office windows, pedestrians hurrying past the sidewalks. I didn't move until my stomach growled, a reminder I'd eaten almost nothing since the morning. I ordered room service, steak, vegetables, and black coffee, and returned to planning. The more I wrote, the more the lines of the plan sharpened. I had built Hayes and Sons by anticipating problems before they arrived. This was no different, except now the problem had my daughter's voice and handwriting. When the food arrived, I thanked the server and ate mechanically. My phone sat beside my plate. I stared at the screen as if willing it to ring again. It didn't. At 10 p.m., I opened the security footage again. I needed to watch it with calmer eyes, to make sure I hadn't exaggerated what I saw. The footage was worse the second time. Daniel tried my study door first. He looked over his shoulder once, not nervously, but confidently. Then Emily walked in behind him. She wasn't reluctant. She wasn't hesitant. She walked in as though she had every right to be there. He scanned my desk, pulled open the drawer, checked the top of the safe. He tried the code as if expecting it to open easily. Emily touched the back of his arm and said something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was made Daniel smirk. Then Emily moved to the bookshelf. She ran her finger along the spines, stopping at the folder where I kept my business records. She didn't open anything, but she paused long enough to commit the location to memory. When they left, she locked the door behind her. The same way someone does when they're not worried about being seen later. I closed the footage and shut off the browser. I didn't want to watch it again. I didn't want that version of Emily burned deeper into my mind than it already was. At 10:43, my phone buzzed. My pulse jumped. Another message from the same unknown number. Don't confront them yet. They're desperate. They'll slip. I stared at the text. Short. Direct. Someone was watching. Someone knew more than I did. I typed back for the first time. Who are you? No response. After several minutes of staring at a silent phone, I put it face down. I lay in bed but didn't sleep. My thoughts moved through every conversation with Emily from the last 4 years. Every time she told me I seemed tired. Every time she asked whether I'd thought about slowing down. Every time Daniel complimented my company but followed with a question about structure, insurance, assets. They had been building a narrative. And I had been letting them. Sometime near midnight, exhaustion finally took over. I slept with the Tiffany box still on the desk and the envelope of evidence beneath it. When I woke the next morning, the wedding day, the room was washed in early light. The clarity I'd gained yesterday had crystallized into something steely. I showered, shaved, dressed in a charcoal suit, and packed my bag. Before checking out, I sent a message to Margaret. Cancel all appointments until further notice. Do not share any details about me with anyone unless I explicitly ask. She responded immediately. Of course, Mr. Whitman. Is everything normal? Far from it. But I replied. Just taking precautions. The drive home was 15 minutes, though it felt like crossing a battlefield. My neighborhood looked the same, quiet, orderly, familiar. But I paused at the curb before pulling into my driveway. What if they were inside again? What if Daniel had returned? What if Emily was waiting? I scanned the windows. They looked normal. No shadows, no movement. But that didn't mean anything. My instincts were sharp. I trusted them. I unlocked the front door quietly and stepped inside. Silence. The house smelled like wood polish and lavender, the same smell Emily had liked since she was a child. The living room was untouched. The study door was closed. The kitchen was spotless. But something was off. The dining table had 2 chairs pulled out. The mantel decorations were rearranged. And a small stack of envelopes sat on the counter, Emily's handwriting on each. She had been here this morning. A fresh wave of dread washed through me, but I forced myself to breathe. I picked up the top envelope. Dad, Rehearsal starts at 4. We can go together. Daniel will drive. Please don't forget your speech notes. Love you. Emily. I read it 3 times. Love you. The words were so familiar, and now so foreign, that I didn't know whether to crumble or laugh. Daniel would drive me. Daniel would choose the car. Daniel would manage the schedule. Daniel would choose the route. They wanted control. They wanted predictability. They wanted to have me in their hands the day before they filed whatever they planned. I placed the envelope down and walked to my study. I opened the door and scanned the room, letting my instincts settle into the quiet. Everything looked the same. Except the carpet rug beneath the desk had shifted slightly. Barely noticeable unless you knew the room well. Unless you knew the rug never shifted at all unless someone stood on it. Daniel had. My hand tightened on the doorknob. I snapped a photo, then another. Documentation mattered. After checking every drawer and cabinet, I stepped back and closed the study door. Then I sat in the living room chair and stared at the Tiffany bag on the coffee table. The earrings that were supposed to be a symbol of love and pride now felt like props in a story twisted by betrayal. At 3:15 p.m., Emily called. I answered on the 3rd ring, making my voice soft, unsure. Hello, Dad. Where have you been? I called twice earlier. Sorry, sweetheart, I said, adding a faint tremor. I must have forgotten. She didn't hesitate. She went straight into rehearsed sympathy. It's all right, Dad. Big weekend. We'll come get you in 15 minutes. Daniel is driving. Perfect. Okay, I said. Thank you. We love you, she added. I know. When the call ended, I opened my voice recorder app and slipped the phone into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. Let them talk. Let them say everything. Let them get comfortable. Tonight was the rehearsal. Tomorrow was the wedding. And by tomorrow night, the truth would belong to everyone. Daniel's black Chevy Traverse pulled into my driveway at exactly 3:33 p.m. He was punctual in the way people are when they want control over a schedule. Tight, precise, watching the clock as though timing itself was part of the plan. Emily hopped out first. Her hair was curled loosely, her dress pressed perfectly. She looked like the picture of a daughter preparing for her wedding rehearsal, radiant, excited, full of anticipation. But now, after everything I'd seen, that image felt like something painted over a wall hiding cracks beneath. Dad. She wrapped her arms around me, her perfume familiar, floral, almost sickening now. You look so handsome. Did you eat? Did you sleep okay? I forced a gentle smile, the kind a tired father might give. I think so, I answered quietly. It's all a little fuzzy. Daniel stepped forward, keys in hand, pretending casual charm. Big days do that to people, he said. We've all got a lot on our minds, don't we? I caught the subtle emphasis. We've all got a lot on our minds. I nodded faintly. Yes. A lot. The recorder in my suit pocket was already running. Daniel opened the back door of the SUV for me. I figured you'd be more comfortable in the back. You can relax on the drive. Of course he wanted me in the back. The powerless seat. The controlled seat. The seat where I couldn't watch his hands or see his expressions easily. I climbed in slowly, making my movements appear stiff, a little unsteady. Let him think I was declining. Let him think the setup was working. Once inside, I buckled my seatbelt while Emily and Daniel got in. As the car rolled down the street, I kept my gaze soft, unfocused, the way an aging man might look if he had been tired or confused. Emily turned in her seat. Dad, we really want you to enjoy today, she said sweetly. You've done so much for us. You deserve to relax. Relax. Another word they like to use around me lately. I appreciate that, I murmured. Daniel drove smoothly, hands steady on the wheel. He glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Hey, Eli, do you remember what time the rehearsal starts? I knew exactly what time it started. 4 p.m. sharp. But I pretended to think, squinting slightly. I'm not sure. Emily told me, but I may have forgotten. Daniel and Emily exchanged a quick glance. Not pity, satisfaction. Emily reached back and squeezed my knee gently. Don't worry, Dad. That's why we're here. We'll handle everything from now on. I nodded, keeping my face slack, my eyes soft. Every word they said was evidence. Every tone, every correction, every patronizing remark. The recorder caught it all. As we neared the rehearsal venue, a restored church hall in downtown Cleveland, I felt a strange tightening in my chest. Not fear. Not anger. Something heavier. Something like grief. This was supposed to be one of the happiest moments between a father and daughter. Instead, it was a prelude to war. Daniel parked and turned off the engine. "We'll walk in together," he said with that artificial warmth he used on people he thought he could manipulate. "It's good for the guests to see the family united." The family united. The words nearly turned my stomach. Inside the hall, guests were milling around, taking photos, hugging, laughing. The air smelled like pastries, perfume, and candle wax. Emily floated across the room greeting people, laughing brightly, while Daniel shook hands and made small talk. I watched them from a corner chair, drinking water slowly. My posture slumped, my expression distant. Anyone who saw me would think I was overwhelmed by the emotions of the day. No one would guess I was cataloging every detail, every slip of voice, every nod between them. Emily's friend, Hannah, walked over and hugged me. "Mr. Whitman, you must be so proud," she said warmly. "I am," I replied quietly. "Very." She didn't notice that my eyes drifted to Emily and Daniel, watching whether they noticed me talking to anyone. They didn't. They were deep in a conversation near the refreshment table. Hannah leaned closer. "She looks so happy. Daniel is going to be good for her." I forced a nod and a smile I didn't feel. If only she knew. The rehearsal proceeded mechanically. The bridal party lined up, the officiant explained the order, the photographer snapped casual practice shots. I stayed quiet, following instructions slowly, pausing often as if my mind needed extra time to process each step. Emily noticed. So did Daniel. Good. The more they believed their own narrative, the more they'd reveal. Between run-throughs, Daniel approached me with 2 glasses of water. "Hydrate, Eli," he said kindly. "It helps with the clarity. You've seemed a little off lately. We just want you feeling your best." I accepted the water with trembling fingers I exaggerated intentionally. "Thank you, son," I said. He enjoyed being called that. I'd noticed. He smiled. "Anything for family." He sat beside me, lowering his voice. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day. The kind that can be overwhelming. Don't worry if you forget lines in your speech or lose your place. Emily and I will help guide you." Guide me. They used that word often. Another synonym for control. I let my eyes drift to the floor. "I hope I don't ruin anything," I said quietly. Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You won't ruin anything. We've prepared for everything." My pulse spiked, but I didn't react outwardly. The recorder captured every syllable. Emily rejoined us then, her smile bright and rehearsed. "Dad, everyone's asking about you. Come take pictures with us." "Pictures?" I blinked slowly. "Now." "Yes, Dad," she said gently. "It's okay. I'll help you." She offered her arm and I took it, letting her guide me across the room. Camera flashes lit up the space. Emily beamed. Daniel stood proudly beside her. I smiled faintly, just enough to fit the image of an aging father supported by his loving daughter. Internally, I recited the list again. Evidence. Documentation. Witnesses. Timing. Execution. When the photos ended, the coordinator gave final instructions for the next day. The way Emily held my arm throughout the conversation, light, guiding, subtle, told me she wanted guests to see her as the responsible daughter. Let her play the part. It would make what came next even more undeniable. As the rehearsal wrapped up, she kissed my cheek. "Dad, go home and rest. Tomorrow is going to be perfect." Perfect. Not for the reasons she thought. Outside, Daniel opened the car door for me again. "We've got the whole morning planned," he said lightly. "Haircut for the groomsmen, final checks at the venue, and then we'll pick you up around noon." I pretended to frown. "Do I need to be at the venue early?" "Not too early," Daniel said. Just trust us. We'll keep the schedule simple. I let my voice soften. Okay. They drove me home in silence for a few minutes before Emily turned and asked, "Dad, did you bring your speech notes with you today?" "No," I said. "I forgot." Emily glanced at Daniel, who smirked. "That's okay," she said brightly. "There's still time tomorrow. Just don't worry if it's short. People won't mind." Her tone was light, but her eyes were measuring. Back in the driveway, Daniel helped me out of the car. "Try to relax tonight," he said. "We'll take it from here." I nodded again. "Thank you, Daniel." I walked toward my front door slowly, letting my shoulders slump, letting them believe the version of me they wanted to see. As soon as their SUV disappeared around the corner, my posture straightened. My face hardened. I entered the house, turned on the lights, and walked directly to the study. I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. Then I pulled the recorder from my pocket and replayed the audio. Every word was crisp. Every attempt to manipulate me was preserved. Every hint of their plan was now evidence. Tonight, I would organize all recordings, all paperwork, all images from the security cameras. Tonight, I would reinforce the plan. Tomorrow, in front of 200 witnesses, with microphones, speakers, and an audience, their entire scheme would collapse. One word at a time. One fact at a time. One truth at a time. And I would make certain no one ever questioned my competency again. Sleep never came. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling of my Cleveland suburb home, the shadows on the walls shifting with every passing car outside. My mind wasn't racing, it was strategically moving, piece by piece, like an architect reviewing blueprints before the final pour of concrete. Every document laid on the desk. Every recording clipped, labeled, and backed up on 2 encrypted drives. Every witness angle considered. Every contingency accounted for. Emily and Daniel thought they were orchestrating my downfall. They thought tomorrow's wedding would be my episode, my public unraveling, the perfect scene to justify their guardianship petition. But they had no idea that I was preparing the most detailed, airtight counterattack of my life. By 5:40 a.m., I was showered, shaved, dressed in my navy suit, and sitting on the edge of my bed with a cup of black coffee cooling in my hands. The house looked different this morning. Not empty. Not lonely. Not sentimental. Purposeful. Like a battlefield before the first shot is fired. Quiet, still, waiting. At exactly 6:05 a.m., a text buzzed. "Daniel, we'll pick you up at noon. Try to rest." I smiled humorlessly. Rest? Not likely. I spent the next 4 hours finalizing the last pieces of evidence. The audio recording from the dinner, from the living room whispers, and from yesterday's rehearsal car ride. Each clip was aligned in chronological order, accompanied by printed transcripts and highlighted timestamps. At 10:30, I called my bank and confirmed a hold on all business accounts. No transactions allowed without in-person verification. At 10:50, I called my attorney, my new one, also a specialist in elder fraud and asset protection. "Yes, Mr. Whitman." Attorney Glenn Barrett answered smoothly. "We're on schedule," I said. "Everything happens tonight. And the witnesses? A full room. 200 of them. And the audio? Loud enough to reach Lake Erie." He chuckled lightly. "Perfect. Call me if there's any attempt to intervene before the reveal. I'll be on standby." I hung up. At 11:45, Emily texted again. "Emily, Dad, we're heading out now. Love you. Big day." Big day indeed. At 11:58, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my tie. The man looking back at me didn't look frail. He didn't look confused. He looked like the founder of a multi-state construction infrastructure company. He looked like someone who'd built himself from nothing. He looked like someone who had been underestimated for far too long. The sound of a car pulling into my driveway broke the silence. I walked downstairs slowly, deliberate in my movements. Through the window, I saw Emily stepping out of the SUV again, waving brightly as Daniel walked around to open the back door. I opened the front door before they could knock. "Dad." Emily wrapped her arms around me. "Are you excited?" Her eyes searched mine for signs of weakness, disorientation, dependency. I gave her exactly what she hoped to see. "I just hope I remember everything," I murmured. Her relief was immediate. So was Daniel's. "Don't worry, Eli," he said, guiding me down the step. "We'll keep things simple." Simple. The word was practically a confession. Inside the SUV, we drove toward the Riverview Grand, the wedding venue overlooking the lower Cuyahoga River. The sky was pale blue, the city hum softened by weekend calm, and clusters of friends and family were already arriving as we pulled up. A valet opened my door. I stepped out slowly, leaning on the car door for balance I didn't actually need. Emily rushed to my side, looping her arm through mine. "Dad, be careful," she whispered loudly, projecting concern for any watching eyes. I let her hold my arm. If she wanted witnesses, I'd give her witnesses. Inside the venue, everything shimmered with elegant detail. White drapery, gold accents, candlelit centerpieces, floral towers lining the aisle. Riverview's giant windows cast soft light across the polished floors. Emily moved through the room greeting people, introducing Daniel's siblings to my cousins, receiving compliments on her dress, her hair, the decorations. Meanwhile, Daniel guided me to a seat near the head table. "You can rest here. Stay out of the way while we finish setup," he said kindly, but with that underlying tone, the tone people use when they're dealing with someone they believe is incapable. I nodded faintly. No one paid attention to me. Not really. A man sitting quietly in the corner, looking slightly overwhelmed, slightly foggy. Perfect camouflage. From my seat, I watched Daniel stand at the bar with his brother. Though the venue buzzed with pre-ceremony excitement, their conversation was sharp, hushed. My phone recorded it all. "Is everything set for Tuesday?" Daniel whispered. "Yeah," his brother replied. "Once the doctor signs the report, guardianship shouldn't take long." The guy's practically walking evidence. My chest tightened, but not from hurt. From precision. They had just repeated everything I needed. My hand stayed still on the tablecloth. My face remained neutral, blank even, as though I hadn't heard a single thing. But inside, the storm was building. At 2:15 p.m., the wedding coordinator began gathering the bridal party for pre-ceremony photos. Emily called out from across the room. "Dad, come stand with me for a few shots." I stood slowly, making sure my movements appeared slightly sluggish. When I reached her, she kissed my cheek. "You look so handsome." "Thank you," I said softly. The photographer snapped pictures. Me with Emily and Daniel, me with Emily alone again. In every frame, I looked like a loving, aging father. In reality, I was minutes away from exposing them in front of hundreds. After photos, Emily pulled me aside to a quieter hallway. "Dad," she looked nervous. "Your speech. You remembered to bring your notes." I hesitated, blinking slowly. "Notes." Her stomach visibly dropped. "Dad, your father of the bride toast." "Oh," I said. "I may have forgotten." She swallowed. "It's okay. You can just speak from the heart. But keep it short. And simple." Short. Simple. That was their theme. They wanted me to appear incapable of complexity so their plan would look reasonable. "I'll try," I said. She squeezed my hands. "I love you, Dad." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were true, but because they once had been. Then she turned and walked away. And I saw it, the quick shift in her posture, the relief, the way she immediately texted someone. Probably Daniel. Probably confirming that the episode narrative was unfolding perfectly. By 4 p.m., guests began taking their seats. Soft classical music played. The officiant stood ready. Daniel's parents chatted with mine. My relatives filled rows with excitement and confusion. They still didn't understand why I'd invited them last minute. But soon they would. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Of course it was. Weddings always are, no matter the rot beneath them. Emily walked down the aisle on Daniel's arm, not mine, because she'd insisted I sit, to conserve energy for the reception. Guests smiled warmly at me. A few whispered encouragingly. She must want him to rest. Poor man, he looks exhausted. He'll be so proud when she's married. Let them think that. Let every single guest think that. When the vows were finished and the applause began, Daniel glanced at me as if checking whether I had followed any of it. I gave him a slow nod, the nod of someone trying to keep up. His shoulders relaxed. He really believed they had me cornered. After the ceremony, guests filtered into the reception hall, where tables sparkled under chandeliers and champagne waited in fluted glasses. I was guided, yes, guided, toward the head table. "Dad, sit here," Emily said, pulling out my chair for me. I obeyed, letting my hands tremble. Just slightly. Her expression brightened. She believed every second of it. Perfect. Dinner began. Speeches followed. Best man, maid of honor, Daniel's parents. Laughter filled the room. Glasses clinked. Silverware tapped plates. Then the coordinator approached me with a warm smile. "Mr. Whitman, it's time for your speech." My pulse slowed. My breathing steadied. This was it. I looked at Emily. Her face was composed but anxious. She wanted a short, gentle toast. Daniel placed his hand on my shoulder. "Take your time, Eli. But keep it simple." I stood. Slowly. Deliberately. 200 heads turned toward me. My hand reached for the wireless microphone. And everything went silent. This was the moment. The moment they would never recover from. The weight of the microphone felt perfect in my hand. Solid, grounded, steady. Not a tremor, not a flicker of hesitation. Just the quiet strength of a man who had spent his life speaking to boardrooms, negotiating contracts, leading crews through storms and chaos. But tonight's storm would be of my own making. I stepped toward the center of the stage, and when I turned to face the sea of faces, family, friends, colleagues, a wall of unsuspecting witnesses, I felt something settle inside my chest. Calm. Absolute, unwavering calm. "Good evening," I began. My voice carried clearly through the speakers, warm, measured, steady. Phones lowered. Conversations stopped. Even the clinking of silverware froze midair. All eyes were on me. "As father of the bride, this is supposed to be a moment," I continued, "where I share fond memories, express pride, offer blessings, and welcome a new son into the family." A soft wave of smiles rippled through the room. Emily shifted in her seat at the head table, relief sweeping over her face at my gentle start. Daniel exhaled and leaned back, confident this would be the harmless, confused rambling of an old man. I let the illusion hold for one more breath. "But," I said, voice sharpening just slightly, "sometimes life gives us moments where truth must take precedence over tradition." The room stilled. Daniel's smile faded. Emily's shoulders tensed. I looked down at my notes, not because I needed them, but because appearing slightly disorganized helped lull them into one last sense of security. "I want to speak about love," I said. "Real love. Love between a parent and child. Love built on trust, loyalty, and devotion." I paused. Because without trust, there is nothing. The guests leaned forward. Emily swallowed hard. Daniel's hand slid under the table, likely toward his phone. "Over the last several months," I said, "I have witnessed something unexpected. Something no father should ever have to confront." A murmur spread. But rather than explain it myself, I lifted my phone, pressing the audio connection button. I thought it best to let you hear it directly from the newlyweds. Emily's eyes widened in horror. "Dad," she started. Daniel's chair screeched backwards as he stood abruptly. "Eli, what are you doing?" I raised a hand. And the room went silent again. Then I pressed play. Daniel's recorded voice boomed through the sound system. The old man slipping faster than we expected. Once the guardianship is filed, the doctor signs off, and we get access to everything, we're set. Gasps erupted. Forks dropped. Chairs scraped. Emily's face drained of all color. Then her voice followed. "He won't know what's happening. He barely remembers where he puts his keys." After the wedding, we start the process. Tuesday appointment. Wednesday filing. Friday hearing. A woman at a nearby table clapped a hand to her mouth. An elderly aunt whispered, "Oh my God!" I continued playing the next clip. Daniel's voice again, cold, calculating. "Sell the company before he knows what hit him." $47 million is more than enough. And after we put him in a facility, we'll have control of everything else." I paused the audio. The room was dead silent. I could hear the air conditioners humming. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to the crowd. "This," I said evenly, "is what my daughter and her husband have been planning." Emily burst into tears. "Dad, please, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, stepping toward their table. "I understand that you met with lawyers regarding guardianship. I understand that you contacted a fraudulent doctor. I understand that Daniel's gambling debts exceed $300,000, and you intended to use my assets to cover them." A collective gasp rippled across the hall. Daniel lunged forward, furious. "This is out of context. You're twisting." I held up a second document. "Here," I said calmly, "is your debt statement from Tremont Casino. Here is your second from Silver Creek Gaming. And here," I pulled out a third paper, "your debt consolidation rejection." Daniel froze. Guests craned their necks to see. Emily sobbed uncontrollably. "Dad, please stop." "Oh no," I corrected softly. "You don't get to beg now." I turned to the guests. They planned to declare me mentally incompetent. They recorded fake behavioral observations. They arranged evaluations with a doctor twice investigated for insurance fraud. And they drafted legal paperwork to seize control of every asset I spent 44 years building. A stunned uncle stood up. "So everything, the wedding, the invitations, the sweet concern, was all an act?" "Yes," I said. "Every bit of it." Emily shook her head violently. "No. It wasn't all like that. Dad, You just... I snapped. My voice cracked like a whip. "You just planned to institutionalize me while you drained every account I have?" Her sobbing turned hysterical. "I didn't want to," Daniel said. Daniel slammed his fist onto the table. "Don't you dare blame this on me. You brought the paperwork to the lawyer." Chaos erupted. Shouting. Family members rising. Others sitting in stunned disbelief. The photographer had stopped shooting long ago, camera hanging useless at his side. I raised my hand again. The room stilled. "I invited every one of you here tonight," I said, "not to celebrate a marriage, but to witness the truth." I turned toward Emily. "My only child. My daughter. The one I held in my arms the day she was born. The one I worked myself half to death to give a better life to." Tears blurred her makeup, dripping onto the tablecloth. "You took that love," I said quietly, "and tried to weaponize it against me." Her breath hitched. "You broke something tonight, Emily. Something you can't fix." The silence that followed felt like the longest minute of my life. Then I reached inside my jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "This," I said, placing it on the table in front of her, "is a copy of my new will. Every asset, my home, my company, my accounts, has been transferred to charitable trusts. You and Daniel inherit nothing." Emily choked on a cry. "And this," I added, placing a second envelope beside Daniel, "is a fraud and elder exploitation report. Already filed. Already signed. Already being reviewed." Daniel's face twisted into panic. You can't do this. You can't take everything." I leaned in. "You tried to take everything from me." Daniel stepped forward aggressively, until two cousins, both former Marines, blocked him with crossed arms. I turned back to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tolerating this interruption. You may leave at any time." Half the room stood immediately. The other half remained frozen, dazed, shattered. Emily collapsed into her chair, face buried in her hands. Daniel paced like a cornered wolf. I walked off the stage with steady steps and gave the microphone back to the coordinator, who looked pale and shaken. Behind me, people whispered, gasped, murmured, argued, and realized that the wedding they had come to celebrate had turned into something else entirely. A reckoning. The truth laid bare under crystal chandeliers. I left the hall without looking back. Not at Emily. Not at Daniel. Not at the ruins of the celebration they had built on a foundation of greed. Outside, night had settled over the Cuyahoga River. The water moved slowly, silently, carrying reflections of city lights across its surface. The air felt cold, clean, real. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and got inside. My hands rested on the steering wheel. My pulse steady. My breathing even. Tomorrow would bring fallout, anger, consequences. But tonight, justice had finally spoken. The drive home took 28 minutes, though I remembered almost none of it. My mind stayed anchored in the echo of that hall, the gasps, the whispers, the cracks in Emily's voice, the tremor of fury in Daniel's. Even with the streetlights flashing past and the radio off, their words replayed, layered over each other like a storm rolling through a canyon. When I turned into my driveway, everything felt unnaturally still. The porch light glowed warm against the brick exterior of my house, the same house where Emily learned to ride her bike, where her school photos still hung in the hallway, where Margaret and I once hosted holiday dinners that stretched into midnight. The memories clung to the walls like old wallpaper, familiar, comforting, and painful. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I allowed myself to sit on the living room couch and feel the weight of what had happened. Not the rage, not the strategy, but the grief. Grief that my little girl had turned into someone who saw my life's work as a payday. Grief that she listened to Daniel over the man who raised her. Grief that the person I loved most in the world had become a stranger. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped. My eyes scanned the room, the framed family photo from a Florida vacation 15 years ago. Emily in her cap and gown at high school graduation. The quilt Margaret had sewn before she passed away. A lifetime of memories, now overshadowed. My phone buzzed. I stared at the screen. Emily, 12 missed calls. Daniel, 9 missed calls. Unknown numbers, 3 missed calls. Then the text messages began pouring in. Most from family members. Aunt Linda. I can't believe this happened. Are you okay? Cousin Mark. Proud of you for standing up for yourself. Call me if you need anything. Emily. Dad, please talk to me. Please. I made a mistake, just talk to me. Please answer. Dad. Dad, I'm begging you. Please pick up. I placed the phone face down. Not tonight. I let my eyes close for a moment, breathing slowly. The clock on the mantel ticked softly, filling the quiet with a delicate rhythm. For an instant, I felt the fragile pull of exhaustion tug at me, but sleep was something far away, something for another day, another life. I stood and made my way to the study, switching on the desk lamp. The room greeted me like an old friend, intact, predictable, loyal. I opened the file where I had stored all the copies of evidence. The audio transcripts, the bank statements, the legal papers, the printed text messages from Henry. I reviewed everything again, not because I needed to, but because the ritual grounded me. At 12:41 a.m., another text arrived. Emily. I'm coming over. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with anticipation. I expected this. She wouldn't collapse quietly. She would try to save whatever she could. The doorbell rang 10 minutes later. I opened the door slowly. Emily stood under the porch light, makeup smeared, hair undone, still in her wedding gown, wrinkled, stained, dragging on the concrete. She looked like someone who had run through a storm. Dad! Her voice cracked. Please let me in. I stepped aside silently. She entered the living room and looked around as though expecting the house to reject her. She hovered near the doorway, clutching her dress with trembling fingers. Please sit, I said. She sank onto the couch like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her sobs were quiet now, soft, fragile, like she was terrified of breaking the silence again. She tried to speak but swallowed. I don't know where to start. The truth is usually a good place, I said. Her eyes filled again. I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did, I corrected gently. You just didn't expect consequences. She winced. Dad, I'm sorry. I was scared. About money. About our future. Daniel said the business wouldn't survive long. He said you were making mistakes, big ones, and I believed him. I studied her face. The girl who once asked me to chase monsters from her closet. The teenager who ran to me crying after a breakup. The young woman who used to call me for advice on everything from work to furniture. Now reduced to this. What about the guardianship paperwork? I asked softly. The doctor. The evaluation. She squeezed her eyes shut. Daniel said it was temporary. Just until everything stabilized. I know it sounds crazy now, but he made it sound like you needed help. Like you weren't yourself. I let him convince me of things about you that weren't true. You listened to him over your own father? Her voice cracked on the answer. Yes. And you helped plan to put me in a facility? She hunched forward like she'd been struck. I thought it would be safer. Safer for who? I asked. She didn't answer. The silence twisted between us. Finally, she whispered, Dad, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Which one? I asked. Choosing Daniel, choosing greed, or choosing to betray me. She sobbed again. All of it. I looked at her for a long moment. Why are you here, Emily? She wiped her face. To ask if there's any chance you'll forgive me. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Impossible. Painful. Dad, I don't care about money anymore. I don't care if I inherit nothing. Just please, don't stop being my father. I closed my eyes briefly. The ache in her voice was real. So was the damage she'd done. You hurt me, Emily, I said quietly. More deeply than anyone else ever could. I know, she whispered. I know. And I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making it right. Her desperation was raw, unfiltered. Then she added something that surprised me. Daniel is gone. I opened my eyes. Gone. He left. After the reception. Packed his things and took off. He said it was all my fault, that if I'd kept you under control, none of this would have happened. She paused. He said he wasn't going to jail for me. I exhaled slowly. And there it was, the truth snapping its final thread. When did he leave? I asked. Right after I tried to call you the third time, she said. He told me I ruined everything and drove off. Somewhere inside me, something eased, not enough to heal, but enough to breathe. Dad, I have nowhere to go, Emily whispered. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't an innocent victim. She wasn't a child. She wasn't a mastermind either. She was a grown woman who made terrible decisions driven by fear, greed, and the wrong man's influence. I let a long silence pass. Then I said, You can stay here tonight. Just tonight. Her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you. But Emily, I added firmly, forgiveness will take time. Maybe a long time. Maybe forever. I don't know yet. She nodded, shoulders shaking. I understand. I'll help you stand on your own, I said. But I won't rebuild what you tried to destroy. She bowed her head. You'll sleep in the guest room. We'll talk tomorrow. She stood, wiped her cheeks, and walked slowly down the hallway. I watched her go. For the first time all day, I felt something other than anger or sorrow. I felt clarity. The war was over. The enemy had fled. The soldier remained. But the battlefield wasn't empty. Not yet. I stayed up for another hour, sitting in my chair, listening to the quiet house settle around me. Emily was here. Daniel was gone. Justice had been delivered. Tomorrow, the rebuilding would begin. Not of my company. Not of my estate. But of whatever was left of my family. Morning light crept through the blinds in thin, fragile lines. Lines that stretched across the hardwood floor and ended at the edge of the guest room door. For the first time in years, the house felt both full and hollow. Emily was still asleep in the guest room, her soft breathing barely audible through the quiet hallway. I stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee into my favorite ceramic mug, the one Margaret bought from a roadside shop in Tennessee. The smell filled the room, warm and steady, grounding me in a way nothing else had lately. My phone buzzed. A text from attorney Glenn Barrett. Ready when you are. We'll finalize asset restructuring today. Another text followed from cousin Mark. Don't forget, family meeting later. Everyone wants to check in. And then, Emily, good morning, Dad. Can we talk? I sipped my coffee slowly before replying. Me. In the living room. Come when you're ready. 10 minutes later she appeared, hair tied back, still in yesterday's dress shirt she'd borrowed from the closet, eyes swollen but clearer than last night. Morning, she whispered. Have a seat. She sat across from me, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence stretched, fragile but necessary. Did you sleep? I finally asked. A little, she said. Mostly I just thought. I nodded. Good. She exhaled shakily. Dad, about last night. I'm still trying to understand how I got so lost. I mean, I know what I did. I know it was terrible. But I keep thinking, how did I let Daniel twist everything so badly? You let him, I said calmly. That's the truth. She swallowed hard. I don't say that to shame you, I continued. I say it because until you accept responsibility, you can't move forward. Her eyes shimmered. I'm trying. I know. I leaned back in my chair. What's your plan now? I don't know, she admitted. My car is at the venue. My husband, if I can even call him that, ran off. I don't have a home. I don't have a job anymore since I left mine to plan the wedding. My savings, well, they're not enough. Not enough for what? I asked. For anything, she whispered. That's the first honest thing you've said in months. She looked up, startled. I held her gaze, firm but not cold. Emily, I'm going to help you. But not the way you expect. She blinked. What do you mean? I'll give you a place to stay temporarily. I'll help you get back on your feet. But there will be conditions. She nodded quickly. Anything. First, I said, you will start therapy. Not because you're broken. Because you need help understanding why you chose the path you did. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't look away. Okay. Second, you will find work. Real work. Any work. Your independence depends on you rebuilding your life one brick at a time. I understand. And third, I paused, letting the weight settle. You will not ask me about money. You will earn your own. She nodded again, this time slower. I won't. I promise. I studied her for a long moment. Her face was tired but honest, more honest than I'd seen in years. Maybe for the first time since Margaret's passing, she wasn't hiding behind expectations or guilt or manipulation. She was simply Emily. And Emily was trying. I softened slightly. I don't know where our relationship will be in a month, or a year. I don't know what this road looks like. But you're my daughter. And I'm willing to start rebuilding. Her breath hitched. Dad, thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said gently. This will take time. We're not who we used to be. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was beginning to stir. Kids riding bikes, 2 men walking dogs, a couple jogging past the corner. Life continued, as it always did. Emily approached slowly and stood beside me. What about Daniel? She asked quietly. What happens now? I met her eyes. Daniel made his choice. And he ran when the consequences arrived. That tells you who he is. She nodded. Do you think he'll come back? No, I said. And I hope he doesn't. She exhaled, relieved and sorrowful at the same time. I placed a hand on her shoulder. This is your life now, Emily. Not his. She nodded again. I know. We stood there in silence until my phone buzzed again. Another message from Attorney Barrett. Meeting at 2 p.m. Bring documentation. Emily glanced at the notification and swallowed. I know you're busy. I won't get in the way. You're not in the way, I said. But I am busy. I'll go get my things from the venue later, she said. I'll walk if I have to. No, I replied. I'll drive you. Your car is still in the parking lot. We'll get it today. Her eyes softened, grateful. Okay. She turned to leave, then stopped. Dad, I know things can't go back to what they were. But maybe, She paused, searching the floor. Maybe they can be better someday. Better in a different way. Maybe, I agreed. She disappeared down the hallway toward the guest room. I stood there for another minute, letting the quiet settle around me. The storm was ending. But the rebuilding, slow, methodical, necessary, was just beginning. By afternoon, we drove to the Riverview Grand to retrieve Emily's car. The staff avoided eye contact, the fallout of last night lingering like smoke. Emily stepped out of my car, still wearing the borrowed dress shirt, wedding gown folded on her lap. As she walked toward her parked sedan, several workers whispered. She kept her head down. She'd learn humility now. Humility forged the strongest people. When she returned with her keys, she paused beside my driver's side window. "I'll come home later tonight," she said softly. "After I get some clothes." "Drive safely," I replied. She gave a small nod and left. At 2 p.m., I met Attorney Barrett at his downtown office. We finalized the asset protections, trust transfers, corporate reinforcements, and new legal restrictions. Everything was sealed, notarized, locked into place. Emily would never have the power to dismantle my life again. No one would. When the meeting concluded, Barrett closed the folder and looked at me. "You did the right thing," he said. "Families can wound deeper than strangers. But you handled this with precision." "Thank you," I said. "It needed to be done." "It did," he agreed. "But what comes next is up to you." His words stayed with me the entire drive home. That evening, Emily returned with a small duffel bag. She cooked dinner, simple pasta, slightly overcooked, but she tried. We ate in the dining room, the two of us sitting across from empty chairs that once held Margaret and hopeful futures. After dinner, she washed every dish, wiped the counters, swept the floor. She was trying. Slowly. Steadily. And I found myself allowing it. Later, she approached the hall closet where Margaret's wedding quilt hung folded on the top shelf. Emily touched the edge gently. "I miss her," she whispered. "So do I said. Another silence passed, the kind that does not hurt but simply exists. Finally, she looked at me with something like hope. "Dad, do you think Mom would forgive me?" I paused. "Yes," I said quietly. "But she would expect you to earn it." Emily nodded, tears glistening. And for the first time since everything began, I believed that maybe, just maybe, Emily could become someone worth forgiving. Weeks passed. Then months. Emily found a job, nothing glamorous, but honest work. She saved her money. She attended therapy. She apologized to relatives. She avoided Daniel's calls, texts, and desperate attempts to drag her back into chaos. She rebuilt herself. Brick by brick. Day by day. And I rebuilt something too. Not trust, not fully. But a space where trust could possibly grow again someday. Maybe. But one thing never changed. I never regretted exposing the truth. If I had walked into that wedding blind. If I had ignored the messages. If I had trusted my feelings over the evidence. I would be living in a facility right now. My business gone. My home sold. My freedom erased. My dignity stolen. Sometimes justice has a price. Sometimes love requires boundaries. Sometimes the most painful truth is the most necessary one. And sometimes, just sometimes, the scariest thing a family can face is the truth spoken out loud. If you made it to the end of my story, thank you. Before you scroll away, don't forget. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And if you want another story filled with twists, betrayal, and justice, click the next video on your screen. Thank you for watching.